You're now listening to All Hog Sports, covering all Arkansas Razorback sports, such as football, basketball, baseball, and much more. Now, here's your host for today's show, Sam Stimpson.
Arkansas wrapped up their regular season with a defeating loss to the Alabama Crimson Tide, 52-3. It was a rough one, but obviously you're playing the number one seed in the country, who, in my opinion, will likely win it all this year, Bama. It's a hard thing to do. We've lost 13 straight to this Alabama team, and, you know, as long as Nick Saban's there, I don't think it's going to end anytime soon. What he's been able to do with that program is phenomenal. But we'll talk about the game, a couple takeaways that are positive, even though it was a rough game overall. If you like what you're hearing, though, make sure to follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at All Hog Sports Pod. I tweet out stuff about the show, opinions around the SEC, and I've actually been starting to bring out basketball power rankings, and I'll talk about that on tomorrow's show, which will be about basketball. I know I've been kind of slacking a little bit. I had to wrap up some stuff, but I should be having a ton of content out in December, and I think this Razorback team is bound for a bowl game, so I'll have an in-depth preview like never before for that one. But if you like what you're hearing, make sure to leave a 5-star review.
Now, for the Arkansas Razorbacks.
Now, I know a lot of people are going to say there's no positives out of this. You know, we just got defeated. Sure, that's true, but I think there is a couple positives out of this. Trey Knox had a really good game, and he got a catch, and I know he really hasn't been the guy this year, but he's a really good downfield blocker, and I thought he brought that, you know, intensity and everything he's been doing down the field on Saturday. I think he's going to play a really good game next year, too, assuming we get all three starting wide receivers back, because I think Warren will be returning for his extra year eligibility. But I like the role he has with the team right now. I'd like to see it in the bowl game, because I think he has a ton of star potential that we've seen flashes of. Matthew Phillips started as the kicker, and he made a field goal. A lot of Razorback fans aren't going to kind of overlook this, but it's really big, I think. Obviously, you have Cameron Little coming onto the hill, which is the number one kicker in the ESPN rankings, number 2 just about anywhere else for kicker recruits. Really talented kicker. He'll probably be starting next year, but Matthew Phillips played a pretty good role and looked confident out there. So if we get to a bowl game, I think he'll take the kicking duties over Reed. But this loss, I just think hurt. You know, I mean, obviously this recap's going to be a little shorter because there's not much to talk about. And you look at the Chad Morris years, and this was week in and week out. We were losing like this to Western Kentucky, San Jose State, North Texas. And the fact that the Razorbacks have played in every game except for the Florida game and the second half of A&M, second half of Florida too, but Bama, the fact that this is the only time that I felt this all year is a good thing. Obviously, Sam Pittman has restored competitiveness to this Razorback football program. I'll talk about that when I recap the whole season after the bowl game, or, you know, whenever we hear more about the end of the season. But this was the only game of the year that we actually lost by this much, and it was a crushing defeat. We've played in every other game for some of it, and there's been a ton of takeaways. So that enough, I think, is enough to talk about how much this Razorback football program has improved last year from this year, and then what else is, you know, to come. The fact that we played 9 competitive SEC football games, but then the last one we're playing the best team in the nation, and we don't compete. That doesn't define a program by who they are. Bama is a really good team, and when I start to look at this game, where it was lost was in the trenches. Obviously, Alabama was dealing with some COVID issues up on the front. I didn't really get a chance to talk about that because I didn't do a preview, but I'll preview, you know, the bowl games and all that in the future. So don't think that's going away. Just didn't have that today. Offensive line, though, Bama, their guys are like all 300-plus pounds. Same thing on their defensive line, all like 300-plus pounds, 6'4", 6'5", 6'6". They have so much depth, too. They lost guys due to COVID, and they had guys who were beating us. So, obviously, Bama is that school, and I don't see it stopping anytime soon. You're playing the best team in the nation, and you lose the game in the trenches. I think that is something that stresses a bigger impact on the season. So you look at what Pittman's talking about in post-game conferences and things like that, is we need offensive linemen and defensive linemen. And I think we will go to JUCO in the transfer portal to find experienced guys that can bring immediate help, and even high school guys. Early National Signing Day is this Wednesday, though, and then the transfer portal and all of that. I'd expect us, though, to grab a couple guys because we have 5 guys left in that class. But another thing is Franks. For a little bit, Franks restored competitive quarterback play. I mean, he played really good while the time was here. Obviously, he really didn't perform this well this game. Playing against Bama, he took 8 sacks, which resulted in 13 carries for a negative 25 yards. He was 8 out of 10 with 90 yards. And the first thing I want to say, he's a warrior and a leader. He obviously leads this team, being one of the captains. Obviously, quarterback play has been so unstable forever, and Franks comes in, gets that starting role, and plays good. Obviously, I think there is a point where you have to recognize what Franks has done for this program. He didn't have to play. We could have easily sent, Jack Lindsey or John Stephen Jones, Malik, whoever out there, but Franks kept playing with his rib injury after he took 8 sacks in hits. I just love this kid, the amount of competitiveness he's brought to this program, adversity, and he's just a fighter. Now, whether it comes back for 2020 or not sure on that. But what he's done for this program is undeniable, and I think doesn't get the recognition it deserves. KJ Jefferson, though, he played a little bit because we wanted to change the tempo up, but then he didn't play too well. Then we put Franks back in. Then we started getting beat bad, so we put KJ back out there, and he had a knee injury. However, the MRIs come back that it's not an ACL tear, and, he's just kind of banged up, and he's wearing, one of those braces and all of that. So I'm glad that, he's healthy, and he's probably going to be able to start, in the quarterback battle next year, wherever that takes us. So I know the Razorback fans were concerned about that, but good news out of Fayetteville there. Offensive line play, though, is just hard, bigger and better programs, and the only way to get out this is to recruit, get JUCO guys, get transfers. I think that's one thing the Razorbacks are going to have to hit hard is getting linemen, because linemen win you games in the SEC. I think a lot of people don't recognize that just because it's not as flashy, and, it's kind of harder to look at stats for offensive and defensive linemen because they aren't, usually the guys making big tackles or guys getting catches, they won't. But I don't think a lot of people realize how good having a good offensive line and defensive line is. But I think Pittman knows how to do that. You look at some of the best offensive lines in Razorback history, and Pittman coached them. I believe we'll have that competitive advantage, and I think this shows you how we have to play better on the lines and get stronger in the weight room and bring in a possible couple guys in the transfer portal if we lose a couple guys to the NFL or transfers, Whole lot of stuff is going to happen during the offseason with this team as normal because, it's college football. You can transfer whenever. I think another little bit of concern, though, Trillin Smith has performed really well, and I know he's kind of thrown into a situation where Boyd opted out. He's RB1, but he was taking a lot of the RB1 reps anyway, and he's kind of been a little bit concerning me after the Mizzou game when he fumbled a couple times, and he obviously had 13 carries for 64 yards in this defeat. But I really like what I see from him because he's a explosive runner. He hits the upside. He averaged 6 yards per carry this year, and I'm really looking forward to see his jump during the offseason. I think one thing, though, a lot of Razorback fans are concerned about is fumbles. But I think as you get more guys getting more reps in practice and stuff, it's going to get better. More experience equals better performance. And he's getting that experience this year in a year that eligibility won't even count. So for Smith to come back next year, I think it's going to be a great runner. Horrible defensive performance, though, letting out 443 yards. Lots of points allowed. I'll talk about special teams points later. Only able to force one turnover. Would have had 2 without that targeting penalty. And I think there was a couple hits and penalties that Arkansas got that were just dirty plays, and I don't think that accurately shows how this team plays. I think Pittman was talking about it and says it's just uncharacteristic for this team. And, I'd expect Pittman to talk to the guys and all, and I know people have been seeing the videos of all those that what happened there. I think, though, this can be dealt with inside the program, and, I think this staff and, they're going to deal with the situations themselves, obviously. But a lot of offsides penalties happened on the defense and offense, and I just, when you play teams like Bama, if you make one mistake, they're going to capitalize off of it. It's just unfortunate you're playing the number one team in the nation that will show no mistakes. You have one mistake, Bama's going to capitalize off of it, and that's what happened in this game. I obviously think a lot of Razorback fans are going to say, oh, bad year, we didn't finish it as strong. It's hard to do that when you're playing Bama. Obviously, it's kind of evident that in this year we got, the hard teams because the SEC wanted to get their good teams into the playoff. Not out of state, out of conference teams. And then you look at our schedule, and we start off the season against Bama. In the season with Bama. And you look at teams like Mizzou. Mizzou gets LSU, who's supposed to be like number 6 in the nation. Bama, number 1 in the nation at the time. And then they finish their season against Georgia. So I think it's evident that this was the plan all along. The plan was to have, these SEC teams get easier opponents. 10-game SEC schedule is hard. Our defense is worn out, and I think that's why we see a couple errors here and there and mistakes being made because we have low depth. Guys are either injured. A lot of different situations. Everywhere when guys are injured, you have low depth coming in. Those guys aren't going to perform as well. They may jump off sides. Things like that. So I think the low depth and just going through a 10-game SEC schedule hurt us a ton. Allowing 5.7 yards per carry, I think rushing defense is going to be something that is focused on leading up to the bowl game, whoever we play, and next season. But a point of concern is special teams. Obviously, we hire Scott Fountain, one of the best special teams coordinators in the nation. We haven't been seeing that result on the field. We let up a punt return touchdown to Devontae Smith, who should be winning the Heisman, but he's not a quarterback. Anyway, we also let up a kick-off return touchdown, and then we were doing fair catches on our own 5. And sure, that's fine for now, but it shouldn't be happening. We should be able to take those out and get, good points there. And I just think the formations and how we kick obviously going to change as we get more depth and things like that. But I think if there's any Razorback staff member going into next season who has a little bit of a hot seat, I would say Scott Fountain. Obviously, people are calling for him to be fired, but I don't think that's realistic right now when you look at the amount of depth we are suffering from COVID, injuries, SEC schedule, things like that nature. So I think Fountain will be back with this program, but he has a lot to prove in year 2. I think we will see changes there, though. But Bauer averages 48 yards per punt. Really good stuff there. And Matthew Phillips, the new kicker, performed well and looked confident. So 2 things out of there. Now, the state of this program, Arkansas Razorbacks finished 3-7 in the regular season with an expected bowl game to come. I'll have an episode up on Wednesday, though, covering all the potential bowl games and things like that. However, I'm happy where the program is right now. I think a lot of Razorback fans are going to say, we could have won LSU, Mizzou. Sure. But at the end of the day, we were projected to go 0-10 in people's minds. For us to go 3-7, I'm really happy with, we're 3 plays from going 6-4. We really should have went 4-6 if everything went right in the Auburn game when it comes to that fumble recovery. And low depth, COVID, injuries, and SEC schedule hurt us a ton. I think, obviously, the win-loss record doesn't show the amount of, things we had to deal with because of COVID. You look at the LSU game. We lost a ton of defensive linemen for that, and as a result, we couldn't force anything. They ran over us. You look at the Auburn game when we had a ton of injuries and things like that because we're playing 10 games in the SEC, and we get screwed out of that one nevertheless. And then you look at situations where the Mizzou game where we lose starting linebackers and starting corners to opt-outs and things like that, which don't happen in a regular season as much. So it's a really weird situation, but the best thing is all these guys played a free year. None of these guys are losing a year eligibility for playing this year. They are all going to be able to come back with the program next year if they would like to. They are going, obviously, if everything plays out with coaches and stuff, yada, yada, yada. But they all have another year of eligibility. None of this